Sure, I'm a member of the Mid-Coast chapter of the League of Women Voters, and I want to welcome you to the 2022 League of Women Voters Candidate Forum. Here's a reminder, if you have your cell phone on you, please turn it off because it can be annoying from both areas, and that we would appreciate that. And my name is Amy Fisher. I'm a member of the Mid-Coast chapter of the League of Women Voters, and we want to welcome you to the 2022 League of Women Voters Candidate Forum. Here's a reminder, the people on Zoom can hear us, we cannot hear them. I have the distinct privilege of introducing our moderator this evening, Ann Luther. She currently serves as the treasurer of the League of Women Voters of Maine and the Maine Citizens for Clean Elections. She served as president of the League from 2003 to 2007 and as co-president from 2007 through 2009. In her work for the League, Ann has worked for greater public understanding of public policy issues for the League's priority issues in clean elections and campaign finance reform, voting rights, ethics in government, ranked choice voting, and repeal of term limits. Ann is active in the Down East chapter of the League of Women Voters and hosts their monthly radio show, The Democracy Forum, on WERU Community Radio. So let's give a warm welcome to Ann Luther.
Thank you, Amy. It's my pleasure to be here tonight. Our time will go quickly, so when it gets started, I've got a few little remarks I have to work in here before we get to the introductions. First of all, the Mid-Coast chapter invited all the candidates from all the Maine legislative races in their membership area to participate tonight. These two candidates and two others, the candidates from District 43 and District 44, were the races for which both candidates were available to participate. So these are the two races we're covering tonight. We are live streaming the event on Zoom, and we will be recording the video for later rebroadcast. The video will be available for later viewing on the League's Facebook page and through the League's online voter guide at Vote 411. The League of Women Voters posts these recordings of forums in order to inform voters. These recordings are unedited. Viewers may share or embed the link for the complete video. However, no parties are authorized to download, edit, or distribute any part of the recording without the written consent of the League of Women Voters of Maine. Excerpts and/or edited clips of the recordings may not be used for partisan, political, or campaign purposes. We appreciate your cooperation in this. Now, here are the ground rules for tonight's forum and the run of show. All the participants are asked to use neutral language to describe people and issues, and to refrain from personal attacks, stay focused on the issues. The candidates will observe the time limits, and we have a couple of volunteers with timer cards here. We will acknowledge 1 minute, 30 seconds, and stop in a way that everybody, including I, can see. The moderator, I, will pose the questions. The moderator may interrupt the candidates who go over their time. I will let you finish the sentence as long as it's not a run-on sentence, but try to, when you see the red card, your time is done. Each candidate has 3 minutes to make an opening statement. They have drawn lots for the order in which they will start. After the opening statement, candidates will take questions alternating who gets to speak first and last. The first 3 questions they will address have been prepared in advance by the League and shared with the candidates. After that, and those questions will be limited to 2 minutes. After that, additional audience questions may be submitted on 3x5 cards, and we have some of those already. They will be handed to volunteers. Volunteers who are question collecting, please raise your hands. Lily back there, and Lane someplace. Hand them to the volunteers who will collate them, edit them for duplicates, and eliminate any that include personal attacks. We are not taking live questions orally from the Zoom audience, but we do have a volunteer that will be monitoring the Zoom Q&A box, and they will transcribe those questions onto cards and bring them up as well. The questions may be consolidated by volunteers and posed by the moderator. A question may be posed to a single candidate. The other candidate will have an opportunity to respond or comment. The candidates will be given 2 minutes for each of those audience questions. And finally, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to make a closing statement. They have drawn separately for the order in which they'll make their closing statements. So with that on the ground, let me now introduce the candidates for District 43, which includes Cushing, South Thomaston, St. George, and Thomaston itself. Ann Matlack, in alphabetical order. Ann Matlack is currently serving as a Democrat in her second term in the Maine legislature, where she is the House Chair of the State and Local Government Committee and a member of the Taxation Committee. Ann has been a resident of St. George for more than 30 years, during which time she's been involved in a variety of boards, committees, and volunteer efforts, including 2 terms on the former MSED 50 School Board, 10 years on the St. George Budget Committee, and 10 years on the Knox County Budget Committee. She served for many years on the board of Penquist, a nonprofit community action agency, including 2 years as board chair. Over the years, she has edited a small weekly newspaper, worked for a large insurance brokerage, assisted as a consultant in analyzing maritime casualties, and worked for the city of Rockland and the town of South Thomaston. Welcome, Ann. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Heather Sprague is running as a Republican for her district in the Maine State House of Representatives. She grew up in Thomaston, now resides in Cushing. She is the mother of 3 and nanny to 2 boys. She's also a former clam digger, a wharf hand, and she paved with Russell Fish.
Yes, I did.
Right?
Yep.
So thank you, Heather, and welcome.
Yeah.
All right, so with that, we are ready for opening remarks, and Ann drew the straw to begin. So you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and many thanks to the Mid-Coast League of Women Voters for holding this forum, and to Ms. Sprague for agreeing to participate this evening. My name is Ann Matlack, and I live in St. George. Growing up, I lived in about half a dozen states up and down the East Coast while my father was in the Navy. When Dad retired, he began teaching at Maine Maritime Academy, and I attended the University of Maine. For several years after college, I worked at a local weekly newspaper in Castine. That's when I got my first taste of local government, covering select board meetings, planning board meetings, school board meetings, town meetings. When I moved to St. George, I got to know folks in the community by helping with my daughter's softball team and then coaching in the after-school program, which led to joining the Recreation Committee, which led to being elected to the MSAD 50 School Board and being appointed to the St. George Budget Committee and to the Knox County Budget Committee. I kept showing up, and when folks asked me to help out, I did. 4 years ago, I decided to use my years of public service and education in Augusta, so I ran for the legislature. In my first 2 terms in the legislature, I focused on issues that were important to my constituents. From increasing fees on clams harvested by depuration companies so that funds continue to be available to clean up local clam flats, to supporting assessors in their struggles to apply appropriate valuations to commercial real estate, and securing additional funding for Meals on Wheels, I have responded to local concerns with legislation that targets local issues. My priorities this session will be the impact of federal regulation on the fishing industry, women's reproductive rights and continued access to health care, accessible housing, and sea level rise and community action on climate resilience. I will continue to support funding for substance use and mental health issues, improvements in our broadband system, and maintaining the full 5% in municipal revenue sharing for local communities and the full 55% in educational funding for local school districts. I look forward to answering your questions this evening.
Thank you, Ann. Heather, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Johnny. First of all, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for all they did to put on this candidate forum. I think it's very important for the people to know their candidates and where they stand on the issues. Can you still hear me?
Very well.
Yes, nice.
Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm Heather Sprague, and I am not your average candidate. My background doesn't contain a fancy college education, nor do I come from a well-connected family. I lived and worked in my district my whole life. I understand what veterans go through who suffer with PTSD and drug and alcohol abuse with no proper help. I know because my dad was one of them veterans. I experienced an abusive childhood, addiction, teen pregnancy, rebellion against the law, and other bad choices, but I eventually took responsibility and worked my way out of that situation and got on the right path to redemption. My work background is in the fishing industry, which includes being a former clam digger. I worked in seafood retail, buying lobsters and urchins, or otherwise known as a wharf hand. I did piecework, picking lobster, crab, and shrimp meat, and I did other hard labor jobs like paving with Russ Fish, as our moderator said. I know what hard work is and how important it is to be self-sufficient and free from government dependence. I learned that at a young age from my great-grandfather, who was not only a lobsterman out of Rockland, he was a great mentor and a role model. With that said, I will be a strong advocate for Maine's fishing industry. It's the biggest industry in my district, and I know how important it is to the families. I will push the state to become the plaintiff in the lawsuit against NOAA Fisheries and the environmentalists and cut back evasive regulations that make it hard for them to do their jobs. Oh dear. Healthcare. The cost of healthcare is keeping people from getting the care they need. Costs have to be lowered so everyone can get the care they deserve. School choice and grandparents' Bill of Rights. Quality education, not indoctrination. Law and order, strengthening our police force and our first responders so they can do their jobs efficiently. Putting our veterans first because they put their lives on the line for us, and the least we can do for them is make sure they're not homeless. Medical freedom and protecting our farmers and making sure they have everything they need to keep their farms going. Thank you.
Finished early.
Nice.
Thank you. All right, we'll go now to the 3 prepared questions, and we're going to alternate. So Heather will go first on this one.
Oh, okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay. What are the impacts of changing climate in your district, and how could they be addressed by the legislature? And you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I believe climate changes in cycles. I'm not a denier nor an extremist. I believe in conservative conservation of all our resources. The lobstermen have bent over backwards to preserve and protect their livelihood, implementing all the measures the legislature has already enforced onto them, and they've done a very good job. For instance, using the endangered right whale as a scapegoat to put wind turbine farms all up and down our coast, shutting down fishing, which will hurt many families and Maine's economy. These turbines will kill more right whales than our own fishermen will ever come in contact with. In fact, wind turbine companies are allowed to kill 20 right whales per wind farm per year. I believe in alternative energy sources like hydro or nuclear instead of wind or solar because of the damage they do to the environment they cause, such as clear-cutting hundreds of acres of forest for solar farms or putting the whole industry, Maine's largest industry, out of business for wind farms that produce minimal amounts of energy. That is extreme, and the reaction to climate change has had a negative impact on my district.
All right, the same question to you. And what are the impacts of changing climate in your district, and how can they be addressed by the legislature?
I think we've all experienced the effects of climate change. Checking for ticks every time we or our children or our pets just go outside, the skating ponds that haven't frozen over in the past few years, the droughts that are occurring more and more frequently. A friend recently suggested that deer hunting season be moved into December. When he bags a deer and the processor can't take the carcass for a week, he has no place to store the meat safely because it hasn't gotten cold enough yet. Tides that are much higher more regularly. And in good news, bad news, for those who pay someone to plow your driveway or your road, it doesn't have to be plowed nearly as often, which is good news for you, but bad news for the person who does the plowing. We have to encourage communities to develop climate resiliency plans like South Thomaston is doing this evening. Utilize solar arrays to reduce carbon fuel use, like what was done at the St. George transfer station and the Thomaston wastewater treatment plant. And we should use goats to keep the grass underneath under control. Help homeowners with weatherization in older homes, and whether it's heat pumps or window treatment or adding more insulation. To help pay for these efforts, we in the legislature this last session passed bills to create a green bank, what we're calling the Maine Clean Energy and Sustainability Accelerator, to expand Efficiency Maine's loan programs by substantially increasing the availability of loan funds while decreasing interest rates and reducing barriers like credit scores and income requirements, and the Maine Redevelopment Land Bank Authority, which will help communities deal with compromised or blighted properties and make it easier to redevelop in our village, town, and city centers. These are the issues we have that we in the legislature have faced, and this is how we pay to help to fix those issues.
Thank you. Ann, we'll go to the next question, and this one will be Ann first. What are the major economic problems in your district, and how do you propose addressing them locally and in the legislature? 2 minutes.
Thank you. I see 3 economic issues for our area. First, the impact of federal regulation on the fishing industry. Maine's fishing fleets are facing huge obstacles from federal regulators. I would like to see federal regulators come to their senses and stop imposing unreasonable and unproven restrictions on lobstermen, but that probably won't happen. Instead, the legislature should support fishermen by opposing federal regulations whenever possible, providing funding for the legal defense of fishing organizations pushing back against federal regulations, encouraging the Attorney General to take up the challenge facing our industries, and refuting unscientific and unreliable disinformation whenever possible, like we did when we sent letters to our congressional delegation and the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Next, housing. It is not a lack of interest in working that has created workforce shortages here in our area and around the state. Rather, it is a lack of accessible and affordable housing. Locally, we need to encourage projects that provide housing for a variety of residents, including seniors, young people just starting out, families with children, and leverage state and federal funding to create housing in our neighborhoods. And finally, PFAS chemicals in our soil and in our water. Because I'm not a good gardener, I'm a farm groupie. I enjoy participating in a local CSA, visiting farms on Open Farm Sunday, going to farmers markets, buying from farm stands, eating Maine cheese on freshly baked bread, and getting fresh local eggs. And I love our local seafood, our lobster, oysters, clams, haddock, and our locally brewed beer. To have found out that our farmland and water has been polluted by forever chemicals is horrifying. Maine has made great strides in supporting local agriculture and fishing. We are stopping the pollution, finding those companies whose chemicals have polluted our state, and we will make them clean up this mess.
Thank you, Ann. Same question to you, Heather. What are the major economic problems in your district, and how do you propose addressing them locally and in the legislature?
Okay. I also see 3 problems with the economy in my district. The first one would be inflation, caused by overspending, printing of more money, and government handouts. The solution would be fiscal responsibility and being responsible for taxpayer dollars. Second one is lack of workforce, caused by people not wanting to work due to the government incentive to stay home, or otherwise known as government handouts. The solution would be grants for education and apprentice programs, and stopping government handouts and offering more benefits at places of employment. 3, energy costs, caused by mismanagement. They have skyrocketed out of control, causing people in my district to choose between meds, foods, lights, or heat. The solution would be to make government accountable for those taxpayer dollars and use more of our natural resources in a responsible way.
Finish?
Yep.
All right, thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Next question goes to you first. Heather, what are the challenges for health care in your district, including mental and behavioral health, and how should the legislature address them?
Okay. There are 4. Costs. You either have to be rich or on welfare to get proper care. The middle class is going untreated, and they are getting fleeced. 2 is accessibility. There isn't enough resources, facilities, or staff, and what is here is full. We need to do more recruiting of professionals, education programs for CNAs, counselors, and therapists, and open more facilities for rehabs and counseling for the many people in this district that are suffering with addiction due to the massive drug epidemic here. 3 would be the ramifications of COVID-19 on our kids and others. That has had a major effect on their physical and mental behavior. I'd like to ask where all the federal money for COVID-19 went. It could be used for everything I've just mentioned, and if it was, then why are we dealing with such a mental health crisis? It goes hand in hand with the drug crisis. Both need to be tended to immediately because we've already lost too many people, young people, to overdoses. Mainers should come first, especially our children, because they are our future. Medical freedom. Too many people were put out of their jobs in my district because of the vaccine mandates. Good people that deserved to work lost that right when the mandates were enforced. If elected, I will make sure that will never happen again, and I will work hard to make sure those people get their jobs back, and will also protect their right to job security, especially our nurses. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now that question to you, Ann. What are the challenges for healthcare in your district, including mental and behavioral health, and how should the legislature address them?
Well, 10 years ago, I was part of an effort to establish a federally qualified health center here on the mainland in Knox County. A federally qualified health center, or FQHC, is an outpatient clinic that qualifies for special reimbursement systems under Medicare and Medicaid. And FQHC provides comprehensive health services to underserved areas, which would include us. Services would include preventive health care, dental services, mental health and substance use services, hospital and specialty care, and transportation to get to those services. We were not successful then, but I'm happy to report that the project did not go away, but was just waiting for the right time to try again. It's still in the beginning stages, but I'm positive it will be successful this time. I would also like to see a comprehensive, integrative approach to addressing behavioral health and substance use issues. This approach would involve prevention, treatment, and follow-up care, along with counseling, support, and general health care services to help individuals succeed in their recovery. We should also create and support programs that keep people from being incarcerated when what they need is recovery assistance. Additionally, it is important to ensure that those who enter jail or prison with substance use issues have access to continuing treatment during incarceration and after release.
Thank you. All right, we'll move now to audience questions, continuing to alternate. There's a pot, okay.
These are all similar.
All right, let me have a look at those. I've got some others in advance here, so we'll take these other ones first.
Sorry.
It's all right.
These are coordinated. That's the only one I have.
Okay. Pardon me for that.
No worries.
So we'll go to the audience questions next, still with you, starting Ann.
Okay.
The first one is, and 2 minutes still, defund the police or refund the police, and why?
In our area, the police is the county sheriff's office. They are thinly spread, and it is an effort for them to provide the services that are required throughout the county. The state has abdicated its work down here in favor of the county, and while we do have a couple of police departments in Thomaston, Rockland, Camden, /Rockport, other communities are without these services. When I was on the Knox County Budget Committee, I worked to provide appropriate salaries and benefits for those who were hired by the county sheriff's offices to work for the county. It was an effort to bring their salaries up to what was a good level, because it was we were churning people there. So many people were coming in and then leaving shortly thereafter. So I am all in favor of paying the sheriff's department's deputies an appropriate salary and supporting them in the work that they do.
Okay, I'm going to ask the audience to, I know everybody's got a lot invested in this, and there's a lot of enthusiasm for both candidates. I think you're going to have a chance to applaud both candidates at the end when we say goodbye, but I'm going to ask you to please maintain a respectful silence in the meantime so that we can concentrate on what the candidates are saying. So now that question to you, Heather, defund or refund the police, and why?
Fund the police completely. Give them everything they need to do their jobs efficiently. There's no reason to defund them. Without them, crime skyrockets. society goes to the toilet. I mean, fund the police.
Is that it?
Yes.
All righty. We've got a few different questions on this next topic, so I've sort of combined them a little bit. Go to you first, 2 minutes.
Okay.
Given that the Supreme Court has now overturned Roe v. Wade in the Dobbs decision, should Maine's abortion law change, and if so, how?
Well, that gave the states power to have control over the abortion issue. That didn't do anything but that. And I can't say whether I'd change the law or not. You know, they need to put in a bill to do that, and I can't say that from here.
If a bill came up to change it, would you support it? In what way?
I would have to look at how the full reading of that bill before I could make a decision, a wise decision on that. I'd have to have more information than that.
All right. Then to you, Ann, same question. Now that the Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade, what would be your position on changing Maine's abortion laws, and in what way?
I'm very supportive of the laws that we have on the books right now. I think they protect women. I think they allow them to obtain the health care services that they desire, need, want. The only thing that I would say is that I would like to have a safe haven bill put forward so that women from other states who come here, because their states use draconian rules to prevent abortion services and women's health care. And I would like to have a safe haven bill so that they are not harassed when they're here, then that they don't face repercussions when they return home.
Thank you. We've got quite a few questions here on gender-affirming surgery. This will go to you first, Ann.
Mm-hmm.
What is your position on gender-affirming surgery and irreversible treatments offered to minors?
That is an issue for the parents and for the minors themselves. Gender-affirming surgery is an issue that I believe is best addressed by the parents, by the child, by their doctor. It's not an issue that should be regulated or taken up by the state. It is a private matter, and I think that that's where it should remain.
All right, thank you. Same question to you, Heather. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, you don't have to. I would outlaw it completely.
Would you like to elaborate? You've got
It's
a minute
there's
more.
no need of doing that. That's butchering your body because somebody's talked you into it. Children aren't old enough to make up their own minds about that. I mean, yes, it may be up to the parents, but I think that's borderline child abuse. So I'd outlaw it. Thank you.
All right. The next question then goes first to you, Heather, and it's kind of a two-parter. Do you believe that Joe Biden was legitimately elected president in 2020, and will you accept the results, the certified election results of elections here in Maine?
That really doesn't have anything to do with my district.
It's a legitimate question on the minds of many of your constituents.
That was a legitimate answer.
Yes, it was.
Move on. Move on.
That's you
Okay.
killing her,
Well,
and that's illegal.
well, it's not exactly illegal.
You're supposed to be impartial.
Yes, you are. You quite in fact are by the Constitution.
Correct.
You are violating the Constitution by asking
putting your
inconstitutional questions.
You're putting your personal, yeah.
You are putting your personal beliefs before the actual Constitution.
Should we take a break?
Probably.
Sure.
Okay, let's just take a
I'm sure
5.
everyone want to take a breath from your dog shit.
Be quiet,
Thank you.
be quiet.
Why?
Well, I'm just saying, you have a good point.
I do have a good point, but also inconvening on the Constitution is impolite.
Correct.
The Constitution is for us, for the people. It was created for the people, by the people. You want a dog?
Let's just take a 1-minute break. Starting the timer right now. 1 minute, just chill out.
Why don't you ask the polite?
I'm chill, I don't need a break.
Yeah, let's just have audience silence for 1 minute here, and we'll resume, okay? Okay.
Without your personal opinion?
I'm the moderator here. I think I have a right to ask a question to be answered.
She did answer it.
Well, she declared a non-answer. It's okay for me to ask a rebuttal question, but we'll
How
move.
is that a non-answer?
Okay, we're looking for 1 minute of audience silence here. Are we going to be able to get that before we move on?
I thought these were questions from the audience, so when the question's done, it's done.
Okay, that's fine. Are we ready to move on?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we'll put the question now to you.
Okay.
I can't even remember what the question was. Do you believe that Joe Biden was legitimately elected in 2020, and will you accept the certified election results of your election here in Maine?
Yes, I do believe that the 2020 election was valid and Joe Biden was the winner. Additionally, I have great confidence in the Secretary of State's office to run on election. Also, I have extreme confidence in the local clerks, and they are the ones that will be running the elections, and I have confidence that they will oversee them and that they will have accurate and fulfilled voting.
Thank you. The next question has to do with offshore wind. This is to you first, Anne. And it's a 2-minute question. Do you support offshore wind? If so, how far offshore are windmills acceptable?
That's a very difficult question in this part of the world. The windmills would be coming ashore. They traverse lobster grounds that our fishermen have been fishing for, hundreds of years. To think that it might disrupt the fishing grounds is very frustrating. I also think that the way that it was handled was not well handled by those people who were proposing the offshore wind. And I wish that there had been a better process so it could have been discussed rather than sides being taken and lines drawn and people picking one side over the other. It's also frustrating to me that the opponents of offshore wind are also the proponents of oil and gas entities down in the Southwest that are interested in not having offshore wind. So I think it's a conundrum. I think it's an interesting question. Which do you support, the lobstermen or the folks down in who are also being supported by the folks with oil and gas interests down in Texas? Yes.
Okay, same question to you. Heather, do you support offshore wind? If so, how far offshore are windmills acceptable?
No, I don't support it. And when the people are in danger, I'm going to side with the people every time. It's going to put lots of families, lots of fishermen out of business, a lot of families at risk for losing everything they have. And those windmills don't put out enough power to be worth, putting families out of business, putting Maine's largest industry out of business and wrecking the whole economy over it. So no, I don't support it at all.
All right. Here's the next question. It's about school funding, and this will go to you first, Heather. and
Okay.
Still 2 minutes. Should the state pay to allow parents to send their children to any school they want? If so, how much would that cost, and should the state raise the money to pay for it?
That would be school choice, and yes, I am for that. I have no idea how much that would cost, but I think the state should pay for it, yeah. Indeed.
All right. Same question to you then, Anne. School funding. Should the state pay to allow parents to send their children to any school they want? If so, how much would that cost, and how should the state raise the money to pay for it?
No. We provide public education here in the state of Maine. We have a good education system here in the state of Maine, and it's funded by our local property taxes. There are instances where some municipalities don't have high schools, don't have other schools, and if they don't join with another district, they need to pay for their children to go to other schools, and that's acceptable. And that is about, I don't even know how much it costs anymore for one student to go to a separate school. But no, I believe that it would dilute our education here, and it would deprive more children of a good education, that it would improve the education of other children who decide to go wherever they want.
All right, thanks.
Mhm.
For this next question goes to you first, Anne.
Okay.
There is I don't know if this is true or not, but there's a huge solar installation being planned in the district. People are concerned about toxic chemicals from these solar panels and the eventual disposal of spent panels. What is your view on solar energy and its future regulation?
I think solar energy is a non-polluting answer to our issue with greenhouse gases. It is not oil and gas. It is not a pollutant. It's not carbon-based, and it produces a lot of electricity. I'm not exactly sure about the pollution that it may cause. I have not read up on that, so I'm not sure what that's all about. But yes, I think solar energy is a good use of resources. The solar arrays that I've seen are in places like the Thomaston wastewater facility, on top of the transfer station in St. George, in an old field that is not being used for farming. I have an issue with areas that are good farming land being used for solar arrays, but by and large, these arrays are in places where nobody can grow anything, nobody can build anything, so it's a good use of an open space.
All right, thank you. Same question now to you, Heather. There's a huge solar installation being planned in your district. What are your concerns about toxic chemicals and the eventual disposal of these installations?
Well, like I had said earlier, I'm opposed to these solar farms. They clear-cut acres of forest to put these things in, which takes the habitat away from many animals in our area. As far as pollution goes, I'm pretty sure that when these things are done, there is no way to dispose of them, and they bury them in the ground, which if it's not being used for farming or whatever, it's still going to leak into the ground and get into people's well water and stuff. So I think it's very dangerous. It doesn't make enough energy to be worth it. When it snows, it's going to cover it. It needs solar power to run. I mean, these big, and I'm talking the huge farms like this installation going in our district. It would be one thing whether you've got 5 or 10 of them on your house. That's a different story altogether right there, but I am concerned about it.
All right. The next question that goes to you first, Heather, about land use. According to the American Farmland Trust, 11 million acres of agricultural land were paved over between 2001 and 2016, or converted to uses that jeopardize agriculture.
In Maine?
I believe this is nationwide, American Farmland Trust.
Okay. Oh, okay.
All right, so.
Just understanding the question.
So the question is, what steps would you take to preserve farmland in Maine?
Well, I would, take all the steps necessary to preserve the land. It depends on what it's being developed for, if it's solar farms or, windmill farms, whether that's, they do that on the land too. It depends on what the developer wants. If it's for housing, then that, it could be considered like it's, but I believe in land conservation, absolutely. It needs to be responsibly done.
All right, same question now to you. Ann, would you like me to repeat it?
Please, yes.
Okay. According to the American Farmland Trust, 11 million acres of agricultural land were paved over between 2001 and 2016 or converted to uses that jeopardize agriculture. What steps would you take to preserve our farmland in Maine?
I believe we've been doing a fairly good job of that. We have a number of farms here in Knox County. We are trying to encourage the land that is currently in farming to remain in farming. You can do that with, for example, Lands for Maine Future. There's a farming aspect of that that will allow conservation groups to acquire land that can be used for farming. But it's very hard when people want to sell their land that they've had and haven't used, and it no longer becomes farmland. How do you tell someone that they can't sell the land for what they want to use it for? But I think there are ways to encourage farmers to continue to offer their land as farmland, to retain it in farming. And I think we should work with people to encourage the next generation of farming. We do have some young farmers around, and I hope we can encourage them to stay in farming. And I know we've had a couple of young farmers come back recently. So I think that encouragement, buying their products, using their products, and also providing funding for conservation uses.
Can I add to my answer?
Can't remember if you had time left or not.
She'd had time.
And it's just a brief.
Moderators speak up, we're having a hard time hearing the question.
Sorry. Thanks. I'll try to speak into the mic a little bit better. Give her 30 more seconds.
Yeah, I'm not going to need that. I would protect our farmland from foreign entities altogether, like China or anybody else that wants to buy up our farmland.
All right. So we'll go to the next question. Now, this goes back to you first, Ann. I know that you will not always get your first choice of legislative committees, but if you could have your first choice, which committee would you choose and why?
Well, that's tough, because I got my first committee 4 years ago when they assigned me to the Taxation Committee, and I really liked that. And then I got to be chair of the State and Local Government Committee, and being chair is great. So I would love to be able to continue on with both of those. But if I could only have one, I would like government oversight. I think they do an incredible job of keeping the government operations running smoothly, and I think government oversight would be a really cool place to go.
Great. That's a question now to you, Heather.
Yes.
Given that you won't get to choose, which one would you choose if you could and why?
Right. I understand there's a lot of committees up there, and I would just want to go to the one that I am best fit. But I would like to do the local and state government, or one that has to do with the fisheries.
Okay. Well, since you asked the fisheries question, I'm going to allow one more audience question, and then we'll go to closing statements.
Okay.
And you, both of you alluded to this in your opening remarks, but what specifically would you do to support the Maine lobster industry and the challenges that they're facing right now?
Me?
Yep, you're
Okay.
first. Yep.
So, like I said, I would, I would get the state to become the plaintiff in the lawsuit, and I would, remove the evasive regulations on them so they can do their job more efficiently. But I would support them anyway. I would listen to them, and, do everything I could to make it so it doesn't go away, that it stays here forever for generations, for their kids to fish, and so on. It's Maine's largest industry, and I'd protect and preserve that at all costs.
Ann, same question to you.
Right.
Protecting the lobster industry.
Right. Well, as I mentioned earlier, the the impact of the federal regulations on the fishing industry are unconscionable. For more than 100 years, the Maine lobster industry has, of its own volition and through Maine statutes, taken care of the environmental aspect of fishing. The federal regulations have no foundation in reality. They don't reflect scientific evidence, or if they do, they can't explain to us where they got the data. If they can't track whales, if they can't figure out where the whales go, how do they know it was Maine lobstermen that caused the issues with them? So I think it's an incredible opportunity. It's incredibly invasive for the federal government to again and again come back to the Maine lobstermen and continue to pile on regulations and requirements that serve no purpose in protecting the right whales. So again, I would provide the funding for legal defense. I believe Heather is right. We should become a plaintiff there. Again, encouraging the Attorney General to take up the challenge and refuting unreliable and unscientific information at every opportunity to make clear to people outside of Maine that what they're hearing is not true.
All right, thank you. It's time now for closing statements, and again, the candidates drew lots to see who would go first. So Heather will get the last word. Ann goes
Yes.
first.
Okay.
And it's 2 minutes, sorry.
2 minutes. Thank you. I appreciate everyone being here this evening. This is a great opportunity for both me and Ms. Sprague to express our opinions and for you to hear them and for you to understand a lot of what we have been hearing as we knock on doors and talk to people and go around our district. One of the questions you get asked a lot when you run for office is, what do you want to accomplish when you get to Augusta? I've been thinking about that question a lot recently, and what I say is this: we should create more portable jobs so that people can live here and work from anywhere. We should address climate change head-on and find ways to begin mitigating sea level rise and global warming. I'd like to see more local agriculture so we can grow as much of our food here in Maine as possible, that we continue to fish sustainably as we had for more than 100 years, while also growing our aquaculture programs, that we use forests for more cutting-edge products such as bio-based plastics, building supplies, and other non-petroleum-based manufactured goods, and encourage local manufacturing and encourage local manufacturing. And I would like to see our population grow younger and that more of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren choose to stay in Maine. The greatest strength in our communities come from the people who live here. The small business people, the lobstermen, the clammers, the storekeepers, the restaurateurs, the farmers, the painters, the sculptors, the weavers, aquaculture harvesters, first responders, and those who work in municipal offices. The people who live here work hard. They help their neighbors, they remember the past, and work for the future. They take care of our children and our seniors, and I will always support the people who live in my district and respond to their needs. Thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you, Ann. Closing statement from you, Heather.
Yes. Thank you again for this opportunity for you all to get to know me and where I stand on the issues we are facing. Having been a victim of this system, I have the experience and knowledge that will be needed to make the system better for everyone, so we get the very best out of our hard-earned tax dollars. I have a deep desire to be a strong and positive voice for the people in my district and want to give back to the communities that mean so much to me. I believe in common sense solutions to our problems, not more government overreach. Career politicians in power only care about their own political agendas, overspending to fund their projects such as the Green New Deal, putting Mainers in what I believe in more economical hardship. I believe in the Constitution of the United States, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our freedoms and our God-given rights are very important to me, and we must protect and preserve them at all costs. I leave you tonight with a quote from one of our founding fathers and our second president, John Adams. Liberty, once lost, is lost forever. Thank you again for your time, and please make sure you do your civic duty and vote on November 8th.
All right, Thank you both. That concludes our program for tonight. I want to thank the candidates for participating and for your willingness to run and serve if elected. Public service is a high calling, so thank you both very much. Thank you to the local league for putting on this event. We'll take a 10-minute break and resume with the next District 44 race at 7:30.
Thank you. I don't know, good luck on your race. Yes, you did. That's what I meant. Thank you, what I meant.